It was in the year of 1977 when CABLE, the California Association of Black Lawyers, was founded, and I am proud to serve as the current president of CABLE. I am Shumika Sookdeo, and I'm excited to have you all join us this evening and welcoming you to this wonderful presentation that we have for you this evening, How Black Bar Associations and Black Lawyers Changed America, a conversation with these wonderful legends. And it is my honor to introduce the man responsible for putting this intense conversation that we have together. He is a current partner at Duane Morris, LLP. He is the immediate past president of Charles Houston Bar Association. He is the current co-chair and co-founder of the California Lawyers Association Racial Justice Committee and the current National Bar Association Region 9 Director. Please welcome Terrance Evans.
Thank you so much, Shumika, and thank you so much for everybody for attending this program. We're very excited to present to you our annual Region 9 Black History Month program, and we're also very grateful for our panelists and also the various bar associations that are co-sponsoring this event. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge some of those bar associations, including, of course, the National Bar Association, the California Lawyers Association, CABLE, the John M. Langston Bar Association, the Charles Houston Bar Association, the Wiley Manuel Bar Association, the Richard T. Fields Bar Association, Black Women Lawyers of Northern California, Black Women Lawyers of Los Angeles, also the Hugh Goodwin Bar Association, the Santa Clara Black Lawyers, Bernard Jefferson Bar Association, Lauren Miller Bar Association, Arizona Black Bar, and all of the various other affiliates of various organizations that are showing support for this event. We thank you and we appreciate you. We're also thankful to Duane Morris for hosting this event for us, and we're grateful to Carla Ramos, our marketing manager. We're also grateful to our chairman, Matt Taylor, and our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Joe West, for all of their support. We have really an incredible panel of judges and lawyers that are here with us today to share their knowledge as we discuss the history of Black bar associations and Black lawyers who changed America. And each of these individuals who are serving as panelists have in their own way changed America and had a profound impact on our country and on Black history. I'm going to keep the descriptions of each of these distinguished guests brief so that we can leave enough time to discuss some of the historical aspects and also for the panel discussion. But I will begin with the Honorable Judge Demetrius Shelton, who is a past president of the National Bar Association, past president of CABLE, past president of the Charles Houston Bar Association, and currently serves as an administrative law judge in the Department of Social Services, State of California. Judge Shelton, thank you so much for being with us today. Next, we want to acknowledge the Honorable Judge Yvette Roland. Judge Roland currently serves on the State Bar Court of California. He is a past president of the Black Women Lawyers of Los Angeles and a former partner of Duane Morris. Judge Roland has presided over some of the highest profile cases in state bar court, and we're so grateful to have you here with us, Judge Roland. We also want to acknowledge the Honorable Judge Johnnie B. Rawlinson. Judge Rawlinson sits on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and has really been a force for change, diversity, equity, and inclusion for a significant amount of time. Judge Rawlinson was the only Black woman on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and has really been an advocate to open doors for Black lawyers and Black judges across the country. Judge Rawlinson, we're very grateful to have you here with us today. Next, we want to give thanks for Randy K. Jones. Randy K. Jones is a past president of the National Bar Association, a past president of the Earl B. Gilliam Bar Association, a partner at the Mintz law firm, a distinguished trial lawyer, and a strong advocate for civil rights, diversity, and inclusion. President Jones, we're so happy to have you here with us. And last, but certainly not least, we're very grateful to have with us the Honorable Johnnie Sweeney, a distinguished civil rights lawyer who has been involved in some of the highest profile civil rights cases in the country and has really made his voice heard in advocating for the protection of civil rights for all people. John Sweeney, we're so grateful to have you here with us. And of course, Madam President, we're grateful to have you here and part of this discussion. Today, we're going to begin our discussion with a review of some important elements of Black history and some distinguished figures, both lawyers and judges of the legal profession. I'm essentially going to try to squeeze about 500 years of Black history into about 20 minutes so that we can have enough time for the panel discussion. I don't want folks to fret if it seems like I'm going through slides very quickly. We're going to make the written materials that I prepared, which were about 200 pages, available to everybody who registered for the program. So you'll have a chance to read in detail some of the information that I'm going to be sharing. This program will also be recorded and made available to the public. So if you didn't get a chance to see all of the program, or if you know other folks who couldn't attend, they'll have that opportunity. So without further ado, I'm going to begin by providing a general overview of some historical information. We're going to talk about the history that preceded Black lawyers and judges, some of those key figures, and also some of the distinguished bar associations that are participating in the program that we have today. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share a few slides that will help illustrate some of the historical information that we are going to be discussing today. One second here. I've had the honor of providing these types of historical presentations all over the country for the past several years. And I have been tracking, as I've been giving these presentations, how different jurisdictions have responded to Black history and making this available for young people in public education throughout the country. And going back to March 13th of 2021, I noticed that about 14 states had implemented some level of restriction or were in the process of restricting the very conversation that we're having today. I continued to track this, and in June of 2021, we were up to about 21 states that had placed some level of restriction in having discussion in public schools about Black history, the struggle and the contributions of African Americans and other people of color. In October 2021, we're up to about 21 states. And as of today, we're up to more than 30 states that have placed some level of restriction on having these types of discussions. And in some jurisdictions, they've actually criminalized these types of discussions. So I'm grateful to the various bar associations that have made this conversation possible and our guests. And I'm hopeful that people will understand that having discussions about Black history is nothing to be afraid of. we are better people by understanding where we came from. There are going to be a series of poll questions, by the way, that will come up during the course of this program. For those other than the speakers who would like to receive MCLE or CLE credit, please respond to the polling questions. For the speakers, you can just close the box out because you'll automatically get credit if you desire. Slavery is something that began here in the United States as early as 1539. It was part of the process of getting the colonies established here in the country, and it was a rather brutal process of taking African people out of the great continent of Africa, shipping them to the United States on boats as depicted here. The conditions were not comfortable. They were on journeys that lasted many months, chained together. Not the most pleasant of circumstances, but that is what people endured in order to get here. After arriving here in the United States, the African people were basically treated as property. This is an example of the bill of sale that was used to advertise the sale of African people. There were a number of folks who were separated from their loved ones and family members. People were inspected as cargo. And the reason why I'm giving this background information as we talk about some of the historical figures that I'm going to mention, it's important to understand what many of them endured and came through to get to where we are today. When the Declaration of Independence was signed in July of 1776, it was very clear that it only applied to white men with property. Africans and other people of color were not included in those great liberties that were referenced in that document. As we moved on to the United States Constitution that was adopted in 1788, again, the states were given the opportunity to set their own voting requirements, and those were limited mostly to white men who had property. As states began to negotiate on how representation would be reflected in the parts of the country that had large Black populations, we of course had the 3/5 compromise, which basically said that for purposes of population and census and representation, that African Americans would only count as 3/5 of a person. There were amendments that were passed after the Civil War. We, of course, had the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. 13th Amendment, ending slavery. 14th Amendment, which recognized African Americans as citizens. And, of course, the 15th Amendment, which recognizes the freed slaves and African men as having the right to vote. It did not apply to women. We continue to slowly make progress in this country as it related to voting rights and opportunity. When the 19th Amendment was adopted by Congress, it only applied to white women. Women of color were not included in that expansion of rights. There were, of course, efforts throughout the civil rights movement to expand opportunities for people to participate in the process. And people literally put their lives on the line to create opportunities for all of us to have the right to vote. Many people lost their lives, and you'll see in the written materials, all of the folks that I have identified here are people who literally put their lives on the line so that we could have basic civil rights and the rights to vote. And many of the very first lawyers and judges that we'll discuss, they lived through these moments in American history where there were constant challenges to the life and civil rights of individuals who were fighting for just basic freedoms. And again, all of these individuals whose faces that you're seeing here on the screen are people who died so that we could have basic civil rights. In 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, which banned literacy tests and essentially protected the voting rights for Black people and other people of color. That was later expanded to opportunities for folks who were 18 years old to vote. We had, of course, the Fair Housing Act. We had the Voting Rights Act and other acts of Congress that were passed to continue to expand the rights to vote. We're going to talk in some of the questions about the relationship between law enforcement and the African American community and what lawyers have done in those roles and representation. In the written materials that you'll see here is an explanation of the role that the very first police forces in this country played in the relationship to the African American community. Essentially, they were tasked with returning slaves who had escaped from slavery and enforcing a lot of the Jim Crow laws that restricted the ability for African Americans and other people of color to fully integrate into American society. Some of these Jim Crow laws that were in effect at the very time that some of the lawyers that we'll mention were working to become members of the various bars, working to become members of the bench, barred non-whites from testifying in any case where a white person was a party. These were Jim Crow laws in California, but across the country. So you can imagine being a lawyer and having an opportunity to question witnesses in front of a jury, and none of those witnesses being people of color. Barred non-whites from serving on juries, barred non-whites from voting, barred non-whites from holding elective office, barred non-whites from serving as judges. In this presentation, I'm going to mention the very first Black men and women who served as judges, both federal and state, barred non-white attorneys from questioning white witnesses. This is one of the challenges that some of the very first Black lawyers that we'll discuss had in their practice, was that white witnesses did not have to answer their questions. Barred non-whites from public schools. We'll find that the very first Black lawyers that we'll discuss in just a moment were not in law school, because the very first Black lawyers were not admitted to any law school because they would not admit Black students. And so they had to do apprentice programs. It really impacted their ability to be part of the legal profession. Barred non-whites from testifying in any case where a white person was a party. So you can imagine circumstances, whether it was in the criminal context or the civil context, non-whites were not allowed to offer testimony against whites. And that was California and all across the country. Barred non-whites from serving on a jury, from voting, holding elective office, judges. Barred non-whites from buying and renting property, being buried in certain cemeteries, barred from restaurants, hotels, theaters, pools, hospitals, beaches. A number of the lawyers are going to talk about, especially during the civil rights movement, when they would travel across the country trying to desegregate schools and places of business, they couldn't stay in hotels as they traveled across the country representing folks in these civil rights cases. They had to stay in people's homes because there were no hotels that would allow Black lawyers or Black people, period, to stay there. Barred from hospitals, and this is something that many people are unaware of, but for well over 100 years in this country, and to the 1950s, and in some cases past 1965, if you were a person of color, you couldn't just go to any hospital. You could only go to a hospital that would serve people of color. And if that hospital was too far away, unfortunately, you died. Denied non-whites admission to bar associations. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the National Bar Association and some of the affiliate organizations. The reason why the National Bar Association exists is because the American Bar Association and other state and local bar associations would not allow people of color, Black people in particular, to be members. Barred from public transportation, equal pay, equal work. There are two cases that I always like to point out when I talk about some of these historical issues. The first is People versus Hall. And this was a case in California involving Section 394 of the Civil Practice Act. And it relates back to what I just mentioned. It said no Indian or Negro shall be allowed to testify as a witness in any action in which a white person is a party. In this case, you had multiple Asian witnesses of a murder. The murderer happened to be white, and they were offering testimony as to what they saw. To make a very long story short, the case went to the California Supreme Court, which found that these Asian witnesses were incompetent because even though the statute didn't mention Asian by name, they were included within the term Negro, and their testimony was banned. One other case, an example of what Black lawyers and Black judges were dealing with at the time, is another case called People versus Alea. And in that case, it focused on skin tone and features. And in that particular case, there was a Turkish witness of a murder. He had Caucasian features and dark skin. And the issue was whether or not he was going to be allowed to offer testimony. The California Supreme Court concluded that his dark skin did not disqualify him, because occasionally people who are fair skinned like to go out, get a nice suntan. You don't lose your white privilege as long as you have Caucasian features. But they made it very clear that if you're a light skinned Black person or Asian or Hispanic, you don't get the benefit of white privilege. And so that witness was allowed to offer testimony. I want to fast forward through these materials, and I want to talk about some of the lawyers who really made a difference in our country. And of course, during this period of time, there were multiple massacres. In the written materials, I talk about more than 30 massacres of entire Black neighborhoods that were burned down to the ground, the houses, the churches, the businesses, everything completely destroyed, and the property seized from the owners, which happened to be African Americans. They were not able to pass this down to their loved ones. The same thing happened in some other communities here. And so you had African Americans who were struggling to find their way into the legal profession while at the same time enduring all of these injustices. The very first Black person to become a licensed attorney in the United States was a gentleman named Macon Bowling Allen, born in 1816, passed away in 1894. He was not allowed to attend law school because no law school in America would admit Black people. So he basically had an apprenticeship where he learned how to practice law. He was allowed to sit for the bar exam. He ended up becoming a judge and also starting the very first Black law firm in the United States of America. The next lawyer that I would like to talk about was the first lawyer to get a formal law school education. He also happened to be the first Black lawyer who graduated from Harvard Law School. This was George Lewis Ruffin. I have him pictured here. And he became the first African-American judge in the United States. He was unable, even though graduating from Harvard Law School, to find a job in any of the majority white law firms, because at that particular time, majority white firms did not hire Black people. This is a picture or two pictures of Charlotte E. Ray. She was the first Black woman lawyer in the United States of America. She graduated from Howard Law School. She was the first woman ever admitted to practice before the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia. She opened her own law office, but what she found is that there was so much racism and so much discrimination, people would not hire her because of her race. So she ended up going into teaching. The next lawyer I would like to mention is William Henry Hasty Jr. He was the first Black lawyer to, well, he was Dean of Howard Law School, but he was also the first Black lawyer to be a federal judge. He was first appointed to serve as a federal judge in the Virgin Islands, and then he became the first Black lawyer or judge to sit on a circuit court. Next, we're going to talk about Jane Matilda Boland. She was the first Black woman to serve as a judge in the United States of America. She also happened to be the first Black woman to graduate from Yale Law School, and we have a picture of her right here. Just a phenomenal woman who made history and opened doors for many women in the judicial profession there. We have the first Black woman here who was a federal judge in the United States. She also was the first Black woman to argue before the United States Supreme Court. She argued 10 times before the United States Supreme Court and won 9 of those 10 arguments. She helped craft the arguments in Brown versus the Board of Education and worked very closely with Thurgood Marshall. That, of course, is Constant Baker Motley. And we have more information about her in the materials. You see her here pictured with Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, working very closely with them on the civil rights movement. The first Black lawyer to become a justice on a state Supreme Court was Jonathan Jasper Wright, and he served on the Supreme Court in South Carolina during Reconstruction. We, of course, have, and I'm going to back up just for 1 second here. We have the first Black woman who served on a federal circuit court, and that, of course, was the great Julia Cooper Mack. We have more information about her in the materials, but again, she was appointed and served and opened many doors for African Americans in the judiciary. We have some of the more familiar folks, of course, Thurgood Marshall being the first Black Supreme Court justice, a dynamic civil rights lawyer involved in Brown versus Board of Education, and many other important cases here. Someone that many people may not be aware of that was a lawyer was Paul Robeson. Of course, he was an NFL player. He was one of the greatest entertainers of all time. Many folks don't realize that Paul Robeson graduated from Columbia Law School. He was a brilliant legal mind, but no one would hire him, even though he did incredibly well at Columbia Law School because he was Black. And so that frustration of not being able to find a legal job, he turned to the NFL, and he also was one of the most dynamic entertainers of his time. The first Black woman lawyer elected to Congress was, of course, the great Barbara Jordan, who made history in a number of ways during her time in Congress and opened many doors. She also happened to be a member of the LGBTQ community. One other lawyer that I will mention briefly here, he was the first Black lawyer to pass the bar in Pennsylvania, but he was denied his law license because of the color of his skin. He went on to become the first Black lawyer to pass the bar in New York State. I will mention that about 165 years after he was denied his law license, posthumously, our law firm, Duane Morris, petitioned the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to issue his law license. It turned out that his grandson, Nolan Atkinson, was a partner at our firm, and we were able to get his law license. Some of the more familiar faces, of course, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Obamas, Kamala Harris. 2 other folks that I want to mention because they're past NBA presidents. Of course, is the great Paulette Brown, who was a president not only of the National Bar Association, but the American Bar Association. She was the first woman of color to lead the ABA. And then, of course, the first Black man who was also a past president of the National Bar Association to be a president of the American Bar Association was the great Dennis Wayne Archer, who, in addition to that, was an absolutely brilliant lawyer. I'm going to turn to our panel discussion. In the written materials, I also go into great detail regarding the history of all of the affiliates of the National Bar Association in the Western region, Region 9, and I talk about Charles Houston and John Mercer Langston and all of these amazing figures. I could spend hours talking about them, but I would like to encourage folks to refer to the written materials. So now we're going to begin our discussion with our incredible panel. And I want to thank our panel again for taking time to be part of this discussion. And our first question is going to focus on the importance of Black bar associations. We, of course, have made history, as we saw in those last slides, opening doors in the American Bar Association and other bar associations, leading those organizations with distinction. But my question is, what is the role of Black bar associations and the National Bar Association in particular? And I'm going to begin that question with our Honorable Judge Demetrius Shelton. Can you please share your thoughts regarding whether or not there is still a role, a place for organizations such as the National Bar Association, notwithstanding all of the achievements that Black lawyers have made in majority bar associations? And you're on mute, Judge Shelton.
Thank you, Mr. Regional Director Terrance, for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel as we celebrate Black history, our history. It is extremely important that we celebrate our history, not only to pay homage to those well-deserving individuals who paved the way, but so as to inspire us to do better and to be great, to follow in the footsteps of those who we pay tribute, to be staunch advocates in promoting justice and equality, and paving the way for those who come after us. I'm a firm believer that we should use the past as a teacher for confronting the present and inspiring us to address the current problems that we face. In recent years, there appears to be an all-out assault on our rights and freedoms, and we, unlike any other profession, unlike any other bar association, given our lived experience and our history, are equipped to address these ills. No one else is going to save us but us. As skilled legal practitioners and advocates, we must utilize our skills as we have our ancestors to beat back any and all efforts to abridge our civil rights. And we have done that in many cases as a unified bar, as a Black bar. And we need to still continue to operate in that spirit. We led the way before, demanding equality under the law, election protection, and safeguarding the right to vote, giving rise to America's first Black president, Attorney Barack Obama, and bringing with him First Lady Attorney Michelle Obama, and providing census protections. And in many instances, doing so again as nationwide, our legal community and our bar associations fight for police and criminal justice reform. On countless occasions, we have stepped out in front on an issue, later to be joined in our quest with much appreciation by others, but only after we have taken the hits and gained traction to be joined by others with similar goals. I say this to emphasize, we definitely need our organized bar, and we must be intentional in telling and preserving our history. Our bar associations must continue to mobilize our collective talents as we have done before in order to ensure a brighter tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Judge Shelton. I appreciate those words. President Jones, Past President Jones, do you have some thoughts about the role of Black bar associations today?
I do, and thank you again for inviting me to participate in this panel. It's wonderful. I've learned a lot just in your slideshow right there. That's the problem with our history. No one has taught us our history, and we've got to dig for it in order to really understand how much Black history is American history. But I submit that the Black Bar Association is more important today than it was when it was started. I mean, the National Bar Association was founded in 1925. That was during the time of, you said, Jim Crow and the KKK and all of that. And look at us now, America, 2023, we're dealing with the same exact same problems. And what we have now, though, is which is really why we have to have our Black Bar Associations to really kick into gear, is that we don't have that same leadership. We don't have the same sort of Black lawyers like the Thurgood Marshalls and the folks that were back there in the 20s who lived it with abject racism and discrimination, who saw it, who felt it, who couldn't stay in a hotel when they went to try their cases. We all get to stay in fancy hotels now. So we've lost a little bit of that edge. So in order for us to solve the problems of racism and discrimination and all those things that are plaguing us again here in 2023 that we thought had been taken care of during the civil rights struggle, we have got to have our Black Bar Associations, because no one else is going to do it. I mean, that's the bottom line. No one else is going to do it. When George Floyd was murdered, 3 years ago, I talked to some of my white colleagues who were former AUSAs and former federal prosecutors, and they couldn't get what the hubbub was all about. They didn't think anything was wrong. They bought into the notion that, well, he must have done something wrong to deserve being murdered on a city street. So that's not what I believe. And I believe that in order for us to be the social engineers that Charles Hamilton Houston spoke of, we must have our Black Bar Association. And I submit they should be the first dues that you pay, next to your state bar dues, of course, but the second one. But if you're going to be a part of an affinity bar association or any sort of voluntary bar association, you need to be a member of your local Black Bar Association and the National Bar Association.
Well, thank you so much, President Jones. Judge Roland, if you could please add your thoughts to that. And I'd also like to point out that one great thing that all of the Black Bar Associations have done is create financial opportunities through scholarships. I was a recipient of a scholarship that was issued by Black Women Lawyers of Los Angeles that literally made the difference for me to be able to take the California bar exam. I had no money. I didn't have a big firm job lined up at the time. And it was that money that allowed me to be able to take the bar review course that made it possible for me to be a lawyer today. And so, Judge Roland, you're past president of that great organization. Can you share some of your thoughts of why there's still a role for Black Bar Associations?
Certainly, thank you. And thank you, Terrance, for inviting me to participate in this on this panel and address this very important issue. It's interesting that you mentioned your experience in connection with the Black Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, Inc., because another cable affiliate, Earl B. Gilliam, based in San Diego, did provide me with a scholarship during my second year of law school. And at a time as a single mother who really was struggling financially, it made a big difference. It made it possible for me to continue my legal education at UCLA. And so Black Bar Associations played a major role in connection with addressing pipeline issues. I agree with Randy and with Demetrius with regard to comments that they've made so far about the relevance of Black Bar Associations being as relevant today, if not more relevant than they've been in the past and at the time of their inception. Today, Black Bar Associations are particularly relevant because they play a key role in offering really a safe harbor or a safe place for Black attorneys to communicate about matters of importance with regard to careers. They also provide an opportunity for us to talk about our respective roles within the legal profession. They provide opportunities for mentorship and, as I mentioned before, to enhance the pipeline, community involvement, especially when many Black attorneys who go into either majority firms or in a legal setting where most of the attorneys and people in that setting don't look like them, it gives us a chance to reconnect with our community and to do what we can do to try to elevate and educate those in the community about various issues of concern. It gives us a chance to advance a Black political, economic, and judicial agenda. And last but not least, I'm going to call it out, it gives us a chance to socialize. Socialize we do. That's an important part as well.
Thank you so much, Judge Roland. Appreciate that. President Sookdeo, I want to give you a chance to weigh in. I know you are the current president of Cable, and Cable does so much, everything from helping to diversify the bench to scholarships. What are some of your thoughts on this issue?
Thank you, Terrance, again for inviting me. So I don't want to go back on everything that my colleagues have said. I would echo those sentiments, but I would also add that they are absolutely important because it is a place for us to not only learn about our history, but it's also a place to be inspired to continue and push forward with what has happened and the fights that we fought, and to move those battles forward and to continue giving back to the young attorneys and the law students that are coming up behind us. And also to echo with Judge Roland, as far as, we have better opportunities than we did back in 1925. We are invited to the ABA, we're invited to the local bar associations, we're invited to be members of our state bar associations, but it's also creates a place where we do forget what came before us if we're not connected to the Black bar associations, and we're not seeing what we can see at the Black bar associations. And I'll give an example of my first experience at the National Bar Association conference back in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, in July of last year. And it's one thing to hear about it, and especially in your slides, we see the history, but to see it firsthand when you don't have an opportunity to see the Black greatness, you see the successful lawyers, you see the successful judges, that's important for us to be able to receive mentorship, to fellowship. And if we're being honest, it's more fun.
Thank you so much, Madam President. And this leads us to our next question that really gets to
Terrance,
issues. Oh,
Terrance,
sure.
may I interject before we leave that question?
Absolutely.
Two other things for those who are not familiar with the National Bar Association and the annual meeting and what it brings. It also provides an environment for business development. So those who are in-house or who are looking to build a book of business, they will get a chance to fellowship with in-house counsel, and those type of collaborations form. Also, because of the wide array of skilled attorneys, you meet people who you can partner with on causes, issues, advocacy, litigation. Just looking at the current situation in Memphis, I see a number of attorneys working on that case, that excessive force case that led to death, many of whom met each other at the National Bar Association. And so I see them on CNN and other channels, and I'm like, hey, those are my folks. So I wanted to emphasize those aspects as well. And just kind of piggyback on what Shumika said, it also gives us an opportunity to get together and not be in the minority. We are, for that week, we are in the majority, and that's a good feeling, whether or not people want to acknowledge it, but that's it.
Thank you so much, Judge Shelton. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that particular question? So that's really a perfect segue into our next question, dating back to slavery. And of course, there's information in the written materials that I've prepared, but there's been this tension between the African-American community and law enforcement following the murder of George Floyd. The hashtag Black Lives Matter reverberated throughout popular culture. You had people who were all, at least for a short period of time, part of this new racial justice movement. However, very little in terms of actual policy has changed. As we all know, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was blocked in the U.S. Senate. And the recent murder of Tyree Nichols and others reminds us that the unarmed murder of Black people is still happening, unfortunately. And I'm so grateful that to lead off on this question, we have John Sweeney here. I had the honor a few months ago at the Trial Lawyer Hall of Fame ceremony where John was honored to hear his story about the incredible work that he has done in this area. And it was very interesting. I started recording it thinking that it was going to be maybe a couple of minutes, but as he got more into it, it just opened my eyes, especially as he talked about how he uncovered a police gang. And I didn't even know that such a thing existed, where you had officers who would kill African Americans as part of their process. I want to hand the microphone to you, Mr. Sweeney, if you can talk about some of the great work you've done and just your thoughts on this particular issue impacting our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Terrance, so much. And by the way, you can call me John. Mr. Sweeney is my father. Thank you for putting this program together, Terrance. You young lawyers are outstanding. It's so impressive. The issues discussed tonight cannot be overemphasized. They're long overdue to have a discussion like this, and it's so appropriate that we do it during Black History Month. So let me tell you about a story that I uncovered at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We talk about changing policy, and I'm very, very proud of the story that I'm about to tell you. In 2002, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department took over from the Compton Police Department, which was disbanded because it was too expensive. And so the city of Compton contracted with the County of Los Angeles for the county to provide policing services for Compton. Well, in 2002, there was an uptick in police excessive force cases in Compton. And people started calling me almost on a weekly basis, way back in 2002, complaining about the aggressive tactics of the new sheriff's department patrolling Compton. The first case I took on was a young lady who was just inquiring about her cousin being stopped in front of their home for apparently no reason. And she was assaulted by a deputy sheriff, slammed on the hood of a car. Her jaw was broken and teeth were fractured. Took the case and we were successful at it. But during that case, I found out that the same officer had sexually assaulted a young African-American woman, and it went unpunished, reported to superiors. We took that case on and we got her compensated. But over the years, it got more and more aggressive. Fast forward to 2009, a young man named Avery Cody, 15 years old, was with a group of his friends on the 4th of July weekend, broad open daylight, walking back from McDonald's for lunch. They were stopped by two Compton police officers and asked over to the car, and they were frisked, and young Avery Cody panicked and ran away. And one of the officers who was training at that time, a young Latino officer, pursued him. And I have film of it because there was a surveillance camera at a Winchell donut that caught it, a shop that caught everything. You see the officer chasing after young Avery, get into a crouch, aiming at him and shoot him in the back and killing him. Well, I took the case. We took it to trial. We won it. And at that point, I said, something has to be going on. Something, they're trying to be become members. These are gang initiations. And so I couldn't prove it at that point. I just knew that the history of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department dating back to 1972, there had been these sheriff gangs. And so I said, it stood to reason there has to be a gang in Compton. And so I took a case about 3 years later, the case of Robert Thomas Jr., where a guy was standing in one summer evening in front of a house party with about 30 or 40 other people, and a police patrol vehicle manned by 2 Compton deputies, white deputies, rolled up. They weren't called for service, and they decided to harass them. One of them panicked and took off, and an officer took off after him and chased him about 100 yards. Robert Thomas turned into a driveway, and shots were fired. He was killed. And we took that to trial and got the largest verdict for an African-American wrongful death case in California history. It was $9 million at the time. And at that point, I knew something was going on, because this officer did not have to chase him. There was a pattern being established of pretextual stop. I saw a bulge in the side. I decided to chase him, or he pulled out a gun and he ran. And but I still could not prove there was a gang. And then we had a breakthrough. Dante Taylor was a young man in Compton who was walking along the street, going to a store to get a single cigarette, because they sold single cigarettes at this little market, and a Sprite soda. I know this because I interviewed his friend he was hanging out with the whole day, and he told me the story, because death has sealed the lips of Dante Taylor. The same pretextual stop. I saw a bulge in his pocket. He pulled out a gun and he took off running. So these officers chased him along a footpath along the Compton Wash, and they basically executed him. They shot him and killed him. I took the deposition of a guy named Samuel Aldama, one of the shooting officers. And I asked him, I said, do you harbor any racial animus toward African Americans? He fumbled with that question for 5 minutes. Finally, he said, I do. And I almost fell over backwards in my chair. I couldn't believe it. I videotaped the deposition, and I released it to the Los Angeles Times because there was no protective order, and it went viral. And I asked him something else during that deposition. I said, I suspected that he was a member of a gang. So I asked him, I said, do you have any tattoos on your body? And you can pull up the deposition of Samuel Aldama and watch him answer this question. He said, yes. And I said, where are they? He says, on my arm. And I asked him to describe them. They were pretty neutral tattoos. And I looked at him, I leaned forward in my chair, and I said, what about the one on your leg? And he looked like he had seen a ghost. Well, I didn't know there was a tattoo on his leg, but a good cross-examiner bluffs sometimes, right? And so he squirmed in his seat, and he looked at his lawyer, and I saw his jugular throbbing, and I knew I had something. He goes on to describe the sinister tattoo with all kinds of symbolisms, with the skeleton emerging from hell with Nazi helmet on. And that uncovered this sinister gang known as the Executioners in Compton. And then I found out during that same deposition that these same 2 officers who executed Dante Taylor had beaten a young man named Shelton Lockett 6 months before, and they had gotten these tattoos. So there's very aggressive policing because they were initiating for gangs. And let me wrap this story up by saying that just last week, let me back up. During November, the former sheriff was voted out because of these gangs that had been allowed to form within the sheriff's department. This new sheriff, Sheriff Luna, came out last week, gave a press conference that he has instituted a new bureau within his department to, quote, finally eradicate all sheriff gangs within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That is one of his charges. And it all started with Shanara Batiste, the woman who was beat up in 2002. It took me 22 years to get this done. Finally, sheriff gangs will be eradicated from the department starting right now. So.
Wow. That is so powerful. Thank you for your work that you've done for everyone, not just the African American community, but on that issue. And as somebody who was born and raised in Los Angeles, I'm grateful for the work that you've done in this area. And so I have a follow-up question along the same lines. Many African Americans, including myself, have had uncomfortable interactions with law enforcement. I have shared my stories a number of different times, but briefly, I'll just describe three, and I want to get your thoughts and other thoughts on what we need to do to protect our community. But I've been stopped a number of times driving while Black, driving a nice car, being a Black man. One time in particular, I remember I was en route to a bar association meeting, and an officer pulled me over and asked me what I was doing in the car that I was driving. And I said, well, I'm headed to a bar association meeting. And he said, but what are you doing in the car? And I said, well, it's my car. And he said, well, how can somebody like you afford a car like this? And I said, well, I am a lawyer and a partner at a firm. I work hard. I had another incident where I was in a coffee shop. This is when I was in law school in Los Angeles, minding my own business, studying for a criminal law exam. 4 officers come into the coffee shop. One of them tells me that I fit the description of someone who recently robbed a store. Before I know it, I'm surrounded by 12 police officers. 4 of them have guns pointed directly at my head. I'm afraid to move. I'm afraid to breathe. I'm afraid to sneeze because I'm afraid that one of them is going to blow my head off. And I reflect back on the lessons that my parents taught me about how to survive interactions with cops. Some folks refer to it as the talk. And I try to assure these officers that I'm not like all the scary stereotypes of Black men that they may have in their heads, that I'm a law student. And I won't go into all the details, but by the grace of God, I survived that incident with my life. And then the last situation was at the Sonoma County Superior Court, and I've shared this story many times. I was there to argue a dispositive motion in a high exposure case. I was excited, millions of dollars on the line, well prepared. As I go through security, a sheriff's deputy pulls me over to the side, asks me, what am I doing there? And I said, well, I'm there to argue a motion. I'm the lead counsel. It's going to be Judge so-and-so. I've got all the pleadings with my name on it, the client's name on it. And he tells me he doesn't believe that I'm a real lawyer. He thinks I'm there to cause trouble. And so I'm detained. And nothing I say gets me out of that situation. I say, you can Google me. I'm all over social media. You can find me easily. I'm the only Black, I'm the only Terrance Evans practicing law, right? How many guys with a big beard and afro are there out there doing this type of work? He's not impressed. I end up missing my hearing because he won't let me go to the courtroom. Thankfully, we still won the motion, even though I wasn't there to argue on the papers.
That's incredible.
But thank you. But getting to the issue, what advice do you have for Black men who may watch this program and they want to figure out how to survive an interaction with the cops? What is the talk? What do you do? What would you tell if I'm your son, if there are young men watching this and young women? How do you conduct yourself so that you can hopefully get through that situation alive? And John, I'd like you to begin with your thoughts.
Yeah. First off, in the situations you described, you handled yourself in a textbook fashion. What you want to do is you want to calm the officer down, let him know that you mean no harm, that you haven't committed any crime. You want to keep your hands where he can see them. You might want to put one hand on the sill of the window, with your elbow, the other one on the steering wheel so that he can see that you don't have anything in your hands, and live to fight another day. Do not sass them. Even if they're talking to you in a condescending manner. Johnnie Cochran, who was my mentor, hired me at the DA's office back in the late 70s. Always use the term contempt of cop. Don't be in contempt of cop. If you sass them, it gives them an excuse to escalate the encounter. So just remain calm, keep your hands where they can see them, and do what they say, and live to fight another day. It doesn't make any sense to argue with someone with a gun on their side who has racial animus. You don't know if they have racial animus. You don't know. So just remain calm and answer their questions, do what they say, and show them your hands at the initial encounter. And the more calm you are, the more they will respect you, and the more that you respect them, that will bring the temperature of the situation down.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. And President Jones, do you have some thoughts of advice that you would give to Black men, Black women, people of color on how they should conduct themselves in interactions with law enforcement?
Yes, I would agree with what John said. You want to make sure that you're calm, not argumentative. I tell them to use the same things that I tell witnesses on cross-examination. Make sure you answer yes or no. No need to go into a whole bunch of explanation on stuff. Try to explain it, because the key is to get home to Dad, and then Dad can use his legal skills to make sure that we go after what we need to do with those officers. But I'll give you a story. When I first came to San Diego in the early 80s, I grew up in North Carolina, a little small town where we know where the Ku Klux Klan was. Every Saturday night at the Sanders Auto Parts store, having their meetings and things of that nature. So I was, used to upfront racism. But I remember I was living in Imperial Beach at the time, for you who know San Diego County, driving a brand new, and this is going to age me, a 1984 Nissan Maxima. And I had the sunroof open. And I was cruising down the 5, thinking I was all that and 5 bags of chips. And it's broad daylight on a Saturday, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the cops behind me. And for me, growing up in the South, whenever there's we call them red lights, they're different lights now, but they were red lights, man. They got behind you, you just froze and were just scared as hell. So I got pulled over. And in North Carolina, I was used to getting out of the car and going back to talk to the officer. The officers would stay in the car. So you go back to, hey, what's up, officer? What's going on? So I got out of the car, and as I'm walking back, I just closed the door. He got out of the car with the gun pointed at me in broad daylight on Interstate 5 going south. And he says, get back, put your hands up. And I did. So from that point on, my whole notion about dealing with the cops is what I tell people today. You stay in your car, as John said, you make sure your hands are visible. Sometimes when I'm stopped at night, I'm even sometimes afraid to even turn the dome light on so they can see that there's nothing in there. But I try to do that before they get out of the car and have my hands up there. But then very respectful, and try to make sure that you answer the questions. And as I said, live to see another day.
Well, thank you so much. And Judge Shelton, did you have any additional thoughts that you wanted to add?
Well, I want to echo everything that Randy and John have said. I concur wholeheartedly. I was just going to mention that this talk is not only for Black men, but for Black women as well. Let's look at the case of Sandra Bland and a number of others. So it's a talk that we have to give to all of our young folks. I want to mention that the National Bar for the past decade has been holding forums, public forums on surviving police encounters. Back in 2010, I've referred to it as youth empowerment symposiums, where we empowered our youth with knowledge of their rights and responsibilities. And along with that, created a publication called How the Law Treats You Differently When You Turn 18, so that our youth wouldn't accidentally run afoul of the law and have these potentially dangerous encounters. Simply put, conduct that you could get away with at 17 by being sent to the principal's office at 18, you might go to jail and you're involved in the criminal justice system. And the National Bar continues with the Youth Empowerment Symposiums and Know Your Rights Symposiums, which are really focused on police encounters. So those tools are out there if anybody wants to host such a youth symposium. Reach out to me, reach out to the National Office. Our Bar Association members are willing to volunteer at any time to create those symposiums and pass on this knowledge.
Terrance, may I please add something? I have a son, and we've had the talk. And the one thing, I agree with everything that everyone has said, but the one thing I always told my son is to note the name of the officer, so that when the encounter is over and you come home and I take over, I will know specifically who the officer is.
Yes.
Oh, that's really good advice. I hadn't even thought about that. And there was a question along those lines in the chat where somebody asked, had I reported these officers that I had the interaction with? And the truth is I didn't think anything would happen, so I never reported it. Many years later, I had a conversation with a then presiding judge of the Sonoma County Superior Court, who was very gracious and apologized that I had had that experience, but I didn't do that. So that's advice, Judge Rawlinson, that I will take going forward, is to remember who the person is and then take appropriate steps. Any additional thoughts on this topic? The next topic that we're going to talk about is representation. And Judge Rawlinson, we're going to begin with you on this particular question. For many years, you were the only Black woman on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I read a number of interviews that you've given and articles that you've written about the importance of diversity and inclusion on the bench. Can you please help us understand why representation matters? Why does it matter if we have representation on the bench?
Yeah, it matters that we have representation on the bench, but I would just say more broadly, it matters that we have representation throughout our profession. And I recently sat on a panel at the Ninth Circuit Judicial Conference, and I challenged my colleagues throughout the bench and bar to raise their level of awareness of diversity. And by that, I mean, until we as a profession stop being elitist, we will not have true diversity. We are elitist in our law schools, we are elitist in our law firms, and we are elitist on the bench. And until we make a commitment to those of us who did not have the wherewithal to attend Ivy League schools or come from legacy families or come from money, we will not truly diversify this profession. So to me, that is the challenge. And I think it's important to have diversity on the bench, particularly because I believe we bring a perspective to the law that is not often in the discussions when there are oral arguments and when there are conferences with judges. I have a unique experience of having desegregated a high school. And so when we're talking about voting rights and segregation, those are not academic issues to me. Those are lived experiences. And so I can share my own personal experiences and how important these issues are with my colleagues. Without my voice, my colleagues would not have that perspective and perhaps would not be able to recognize the importance of these issues that are before them. And so it is absolutely crucial, in my view, that we have a wide array of experiences on the bench. And I also take the same approach to law clerks. It is not a well-kept secret that the federal clerkships open so many doors for students. And the federal judges, to me, do not give those opportunities to everyone equally. There are a number of judges who say they only hire from certain schools, and those schools traditionally have been the Ivy League schools. And I have tried to persuade my colleagues to entertain the idea of law clerks from schools that are not in the Ivy League, because I am of the belief that there are good students at every school. There are capable law students at every school. And I hire from all schools. I've hired from Howard University, University of Texas, University of Mississippi, University of Utah, and my law clerks have gone on to do astounding things. And so I hope in that way to encourage other judges to take a chance on students who don't fit the mold that you think is the ideal law clerk. And by doing that, I'm hoping to be a model for the law clerks who work for me so that they will take the same approach and we can continue to spread these opportunities to those who wouldn't ordinarily have those opportunities available.
Thank you so much, Judge. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
About the law clerks. When I was National Bar Association president in 1997, a reporter came to me from USA Today and asked me, did I know that since 1972, there had only been 14 law clerks of color at the US Supreme Court, minority law clerks. There had only been, from 1972 to 1997, there had only been 14, a total of 14. And as you know, do the math, 9 justices times 4, so that's 36 a year. And I didn't know that. And so we put a full court press on the Supreme Court in the press to try to get them to say that this is not satisfactory. We have to do something about this. After our convention in Memphis that year, I went to the Supreme Court and met with Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, for 2 hours in his chambers and talked to him about that problem. And he said exactly what Judge Rawlinson was saying, is that in his opinion, it had nothing to do with race, but it had to do with, socioeconomics, the fact that the justices are going, they're going to have a law professor at Northwestern or at Harvard that they rely on, and they call up and say, who do you got for me this year? And they cycle them through like that. But I said to him that that's not good enough. I know you don't particularly care for affirmative action, but I'm an affirmative action baby. I would not have gone to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill without affirmative action. So we have to take affirmative steps to change the dynamics, to change the narratives. Unfortunately, I don't know what the numbers are today since that time, whether it's even better. It doesn't sound like it. I know on the Ninth Circuit. So again, that's the reason we have to have Black bar associations. We have to be the ones out there championing these causes, because if you don't have someone champion the cause, it's not going to get done. So I just wanted to add to that.
And Terrance, I'd like to piggyback on that. And one other reason for it's important to have diversity in the courts is it instills faith in the judicial system when people come to the courts as defendants, as whatever the role they may have, to see people that look like them presiding. That instills faith. And along the lines of, the importance of having an organized bar association, a Black bar, I want to put this example out there. It was in 2005, it was the 2005-2006 bar year, when then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger had been in the office for 2 years and had not appointed a single African-American to the bench. We, the California Association of Black Lawyers, led a campaign to change this. We called on the governor to appoint African Americans to the bench. We wrote letters, demanded meetings with key officials, and took our call to action to the media, which was covered by major media, including the Recorder and the Daily Journal. It was only then that the governor began to appoint African Americans to the bench during his administration. It is advocacy such as this from the Bar Association, taking notice of where we are receiving the short end of the stick, not being treated equally, and are left out of the equation, that we must mobilize and take steps to address the situation in a meaningful way, as Cable did. And Judge Roland was there as a part of those efforts, and our current president is still continuing with our efforts to diversify the courts by meeting with the governor's appointment secretary every year. And so again, emphasizing the importance of continuing to have an organized Black Bar Association.
Thank you, Judge Shelton. And Judge Roland, since you were called out, if you could add your thoughts on that.
Yes, the diversification of the bench is crucial as Judge Shelton mentioned, is crucial to achieving a fair system of justice and promoting public trust in the courts. There have even been studies that have shown that ethnic and gender diversity positively affect decision-making. I'm going to take a minute, though, to give you some stats, because while we know that you can walk into almost any courthouse in this country and you see very few African-American faces on the bench. I'm not talking about, as defendants, I'm talking about on the bench. I'm going to give you some stats for just a minute. When we look at what's happening in the federal courts, we know that under President Donald Trump, there was a severe regression in the appointment of diverse judges on the federal bench. During his tenure, Donald Trump appointed or nominated more, as a single-term president, he nominated more federal appointees nominees than any other president since 1980. He nominated, and the Senate at that time confirmed 234 federal nominees. 85% of those nominees were white. Of the President Donald Trump's nominees, 76% of those nominees were male. We've seen a change in connection with the nominees that President Biden has, the individuals that President Biden has nominated as of December of 2022. 95 of the individuals President Biden has nominated have been confirmed by the Senate. As of late December, there were 45 that were still pending. I'm not sure where things stand with those 45 now, but of the 95 individuals nominated, confirmed by the Senate, 74% of those nominees are women. 46% of those female nominees are women of color. So we have to continue to advocate for and to be cognizant of where we stand with regard to the judiciary. With regard to state Supreme Courts, the Brennan Center for Justice has, looking at their stats, they indicate that when you look at state Supreme Courts, that the justices of color on the state Supreme Courts around the country reflects that this country is failing dismally when it comes to having justices of color who reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve in. For example, as of May of 2022, there were no Black justices in 28 states, not one. There were no Latino justices in 39 states. There were no Asian American justices in 43 states, and no Native American justices in 47 states. Of the state Supreme Court justices, only 18% around the country are Black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, or multiracial. By contrast, people of color in this country make up over 40% of the US population. So we have our work cut out for us. with regard to urging that more individuals of color be appointed to state and federal judiciaries.
Mr. Regional Director, if you will, but I would like to just add that we do have something to celebrate with the courts. And I think it's important to highlight as we're celebrating our Black history, is that currently on the California Supreme Court, we have 3 Black justices. We have the Honorable Martin Jenkins, the Honorable Justice Kelly Evans, and Justice Leandra Kruger. So that's something to celebrate here in California.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in that respect, though, California is an outlier, but certainly
Right.
that's certainly something to celebrate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I
I
would just-
would add is that cable is to be commended for its role
Yes,
and
yes.
its advocacy in connection with all 3 of those appointments, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that cable is directly responsible for more than 40 new Black judges in California. So congratulations to cable and all of the various affiliates for working so hard to diversify the bench. We did get a question from the audience, and this is for folks who, and this is for the 3 judges that we have here, who would like to become judges, but perhaps they're not sure that they have what it takes, or they're not sure how to go about it. Do any of the 3 judges have advice for people who would like to be on the bench, but they're just not sure what to do? Any advice for those folks? And we'll begin with Judge Rawlinson.
That's who I was saying.
Well, I have to say, honestly, I did not aspire to be a judge. That was not my career goal when I became an attorney. I wanted to start an all-female law firm. Never got around to that because life intervened. But for people who want to be a judge, I think that you have to be mindful of everything you do in your career, starting from the beginning of your career. And I say that because when I was a young lawyer, I shared the same office building with Harry Reid, who later became majority leader of the Senate and who was largely responsible for my becoming a federal judge. And he told me that he had been watching my career for 20 years. I had no idea he was watching my career. And so he was asking people about me. What kind of lawyer was I? Did I have integrity? Was I trustworthy? How was I morally? And so my advice to young people is do what you love to do and do it well. And if you are meant to be a judge, your light will shine so that you can do it. A lot of judges become judges by appointment. And if there is an appointment process, then there is going to be people who are going to be looking at your record. They're going to look at, there will be no stone unturned in terms of your professional life and your personal life. So both of those have to be stellar, if, in my opinion, if you want to be a judge. I remember, I tell this story all the time. I remember when Senator Reid called me over to ask me if I wanted to become a judge. He asked me 2 questions. I had a 2-question interview. The first question was, have you ever cheated on your husband? The second question was, have you ever used illegal drugs? That was my 2-question interview. And so I tell young people, the things that you do today will either enhance your ability to succeed in the profession or to go where you want to go, or they will take away from that. And so you have to be mindful of how you're living your life while you're aspiring to be a judge. One other thing I will say is networking. Some of the people who were most influential in my becoming a judge were not lawyers. They were people from the community who advocated for me and who vouched for me when I became a judge. And I also was a member of the Lawyer Representative Committee for the federal judges. And I got to know a lot of the federal judges, and so they were comfortable with me and familiar with me. And so networking is also extremely important.
No, that's definitely very good advice. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that issue? Judge Shelton?
That question came from a first-year law student. My response to you was first focus on graduating and passing the bar. You can become a judge, or you can do anything you want once you have that certificate. Don't even doubt yourself for a minute, but right now focus on graduating and passing the bar. If you are interested, there are formal programs out there too. Most county bar associations, specialty bar associations host how to become a judge seminars all the time. So you will be able to take advantage of that. And for all of the law students, while you're a law student, membership in the National Bar Association is free. So enroll, join the National Bar Association now, get on the mailing list, find out about when those seminars are going to be held, go to some of the events, network, meet people, and that'll go a long way. But if you want to be a judge, there's no doubt in my mind that you will become one.
Thank you. And Judge Roland?
Yes, I would just add that I'm going to pick up where Shelton left off, and that is that after you finish law school, focus on being a stellar practitioner, not a good practitioner, not a matter of just doing your best. Work hard and become a stellar practitioner at whatever area of law, regardless of what your practice area might be. Work hard on becoming the very best. And sometimes I'll just share with you a quick story, and that is that when I first started working at my first law firm, and I certainly agree with what Randy and what Judge Rawlinson said about law clerks. I had clerked for Judge Terry Hatter, who's now a senior judge in the U.S. District Court in the Central District. And so at that point, I became very sought after. And I went to a law firm where there were about 150 attorneys, and there were 2 African Americans. And one of the other African attorney was like, "Oh, okay, well, I've only been here a few weeks myself." But the thing is that when you work at whatever it is you're doing, they asked me in the beginning, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to do civil rights cases." Little did I know they didn't do civil rights cases, and or some First Amendment work. And they said, "Well, we have a case with representing the LA Times," and it was an interesting case, and I loved it. But after that, First Amendment work dried up. So they said, "We're going to send you over to the corporate department." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about corporate law, and I'm not really interested in corporate law. I want to be a litigator." Well, lo and behold, I was stuck in the corporate department for about 6 months. I never drank so much coffee in my life. And but what I realized later on was that there were skills, regardless of where you go, because after that it was, memos, and depositions. You will learn legal skills that you can transfer into just about any area of law, regardless of where you find yourself or what you're doing. And you might not always be able to direct where that will be, determine where that will be in terms of the type of law that you practice. But still, ask yourself, what are the skills that I can gain while I'm in this particular legal experience, in this particular environment? So that would be my suggestion, that you focus on becoming a stellar practitioner, and that you're absolutely right, you network. I think that I was not interested in becoming a judge. I thought, when I looked at many summary judgment hearings that I argued and I heard, and I thought, "Oh, this is boring. There's no way I'm going to sit here through all of this. I could not be a judge." And then I went into the state bar court and I heard some of those arguments. I thought, "Oh, okay, well, this is kind of interesting." And I only ended up applying after I was told about the position from friends of mine who I had met when I had worked as when I was the cable legislative chair. And so as cable legislative chair, for a number of years, I got to know many of the legislators in Sacramento. And again, people who were outside of the legal profession and some who were within the legal profession really advocated for me. So networking, participating in bar associations where you have a chance to interact with folks, those are some of the keys. And again, focusing on becoming a stellar practitioner.
Terrance, may I add one other thing? Don't be discouraged if you don't succeed the first time you try. 10 years before I became a district court judge, I applied for a magistrate judge position, did not get it. And I think largely because of my response when I wasn't selected, the federal judges kept me in mind for later on, and I became a district court judge. So if you don't get it the first time, don't let that discourage you. Don't let it make you become bitter. Just learn the lessons from that experience and put it toward focusing on your next application.
Can I say something to that, even though I'm not a judge and never aspired to be a judge? But we're talking about, it sounds like we're really promoting the National Bar and cable and all this kind of stuff, but I think we are. I can tell you, when you're talking about network, I can tell you as a young lawyer, I was having a drink with Thurgood Marshall, sitting down at the bar, having a drink with Thurgood Marshall. I sat down at a lunch table with Constance Baker Motley.
Yes.
All right. You know, Johnnie Cochran was one of my good buddies. He would always, hey, Randy, how you doing, man? All the time, stuff like that. I don't get that at the San Diego County Bar Association. I don't get that at anywhere else, right? So when you talk about how do I want to be, how can I be this, you've got to get out there and you've got to network. But it's not like going out there like, you know, I want to be a judge. So tell me how to be a judge right now, Johnnie Cochran. Tell me how to be a judge. You just get to meet people. You just get to meet people and be your authentic self and really let folks, because everybody will help. I mean, I'm telling you, I got so much help, you know, from just being a part of the National Bar Association. I went to my first conference in 1990. I haven't missed one since. That's how important it is to me. When I walked in there and I saw these important people, I mean, Thurgood Marshall is right here and he's talking to me, you know, like he knew me, you know. So you've got to get out there, you got to network, and you just got to be yourself.
I think all that's great advice, and we've got some great questions in the chat that I just want to make sure we address. We have a young attorney who's asking whether or not they should, early in their legal career, both. I'm gonna just jump in here and say both.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to have as broad a network as absolutely possible. I'm a member of both the ABA, the National Bar Association. I'm on the board of the California Lawyers Association. The more connections in your network, the better. And for young lawyers, usually it's either free or very reduced price. You want to connect with as many folks as possible. But I will say, for the affinity bars and the Black bars in particular, I feel like I've built the strongest connections and relationships with other Black lawyers and Black judges. It's been great. And there's one other question that we have here in the chat, asking about how to leverage relationships between the mainstream bars and the Black bar associations. And how do you leverage that and how do you work it? So I think it's really good to partner. And this program is a perfect example. We partnered with California Lawyers Association, which I think is the premier state bar association in the United States. And we've been able to partner with them on scholarships, partner with them on messaging, and able to get the word out about a number of the things that we're doing, take advantage of some of those resources because they have more than a lot of the affinity bars. But we also bring that rich diversity of talent and ideas and relationships. And I think that it's important for organizations like California Lawyers Association and National Bar Association and cable and all the other affinity bars to work together so we can best leverage our resources together. There's an upcoming event, by the way, I think, and this is for people who are interested in learning how they can become a judge. I'm going to put that event in the chat. Thank you, someone, for sharing that, and folks can take advantage of that. I see there's a hand up before we go to the next question.
I just wanted to follow up on that you said about networking. I'm a member of the Irish Bar Association, the Lawyers Club of San Diego, the American Bar, the National Bar, Cable, Earl B. Gilliam Bar Foundation. I go to party with my friends up in LA with Black women lawyers and John Langston. So you can't have enough of affiliation if you're trying to go, because I'm going to tell you, I practiced law for 35 years as a government attorney with no idea I would end up in a private law firm in one of the, AM 100 law firms in the country. And the thing that got me in, because I didn't have a book of business, not a lick of business, but I sold myself on the notion that I know a lot of damn people. Okay. I know a lot of people. So just give me a chance and I can make this work. And here I am 8 years later, still making it work.
And Terrance, I'll just add that it's not either or. You can do it all at the same time. I was president of the California Association of Black Lawyers and vice president of the State Bar of California at the same time. And I will say, when I was elected to the board, became the first Black person elected to the State Bar Board to represent what was then Region 3. But I digress and how to leverage or marry the two. When I referred earlier to the National Bar publication, How the Law Treats You Differently When You Turn 18. My contacts at the State Bar, I can't remember the department's name, but it fell within their jurisdiction. They paid for many of those publications to be printed, or printed some of them in-house. So the State Bar of California joined us in our quest and produced National Bar publications.
And Judge Shelton, we got a question in the chat about becoming an administrative law judge and the importance of understanding that that is an opportunity. Can you just briefly talk about that process of how you become an administrative law judge?
And I'll just add that question is coming from Judge Patricia Miles, who is the chair of the American Bar Association's Administrative Law Judges Division. So in short, there are a number of different types of judges out there. And I would encourage everyone to look at the variety that exists, including those who are administrative law judges, such as I. We have different jurisdictions, we have different subject matters that we have to preside over. And so, but as with all the judicial officer positions, the role we play in the issues that we have to decide, it affect the recipients' daily lives immediately. So I guess, and how I came to be an administrative law judge is pretty much like Judge Roland mentioned. Somebody tapped me and said, there's an opening and we want you to apply for it. But administrative law judge, just to give you an example, I handle things such as Medi-Cal, foster care placement. Some judges deal with unemployment benefits, some deal with insurance. So that's kind of a quick snapshot as to what an administrative law judge is or does, or how to get there.
Thank you. And Judge Roland, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'd like to go back just real quickly. We've been talking about being involved with bar associations that are affiliated with affinity bar associations, and I think it's important to be a part of those bar associations as well, not only the affinity bar associations, but some of the affiliated bar associations. But I would really encourage, especially those of you who have graduated from law school, have your license, and you're moving in the profession, to decide on which particular bar associations you're going to devote your effort to. And I say that because it's important that, and we see this sometimes with folks who ask cable for recommendations. They say, oh, I paid my dues to these 5 different organizations. They say, well, yes, have you assumed a leadership position? Or you assumed, or have you been proactive in being involved in your involvement in any of these organizations? And the answer is often no. What we're talking about is not only being affiliated with bar associations, but especially with affinity bar associations, to decide that there's a particular committee you want to work on, that there is a particular issue you want to address, and to jump in to the bar associations in addressing that particular issue, or being, leading that committee, and being proactive. That's one way that you get to know the other people very well who are also on your committee, or you get to know other members of the organization well, and as well as enhancing their knowledge about the issues.
Thank you so much, Judge Roland. And our next question is actually for President Sookdeo, and I see your hand is up. We talked a lot about networking and how to position ourselves for success. Mental health comes into that, and I was just wondering if you had any advice on how people can balance it, because I know you've done an amazing job. You've got your own practice, you've got a beautiful family, you're president of one of the leading Black bar associations in the country. You seem to be able to do it all. What advice do you have for people who are trying to balance it all?
I mean, I pray. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I do pray. But I think that it's very important within the bar associations to not only just have mentorship for the business or the career side, but for life itself. So I like to spend a lot of time with some of the younger attorneys and some of my peers, but I am typically drawn to some of the older, or I shouldn't say older, more seasoned, or the youngish attorneys for life advice. Now that I'm a mother, I have different interests in the career and the different things I do to socialize. So I try to talk to people about how to balance work and life, raising a family, how to spread the responsibilities between myself and my husband when it comes to the children, household duties, and how we want to grow our careers, because it's not just myself. My husband also has his career that he wants to advance and to grow. One thing that I think is important that I know Cable started doing, and I know that Charles Houston started doing as well as some of the other affiliates, is having wellness and mindfulness programs. It's especially important. There's a very big stigma in the Black community itself, where people feel that it's taboo to talk about mental health issues. So a lot of people, whether it's depression or just stress or just feeling overwhelmed, they're not seeking help, whether it's help in a group, whether it's therapy, or what have you. We don't know how to engage in self-care, to take care of ourselves. Some people, it's not just in the Black community, but being part of the Black community, we see a lot of self-medicating to cope with some of the stress in the legal profession. So I think that's important that we continue to have some of the mindfulness programs, like I said. I know for me, during the pandemic, I had my second child, I had my pandemic baby. I felt very isolated from my family, from friends, colleagues. I was dealing with postpartum depression. I think from not practicing because of the maternity leave and because of the isolation from the pandemic, I started to feel a lot of the imposter syndrome setting in. As I started to get back out into the communities, I felt I didn't belong, or I wasn't supposed to be there. And so what was good for me is I always had a network of very good friends and family who I can check in. I guess I would call them my day ones. I can check in and let them know this is what I'm experiencing, this is how I'm feeling, and for them to give me the reality check and remind me that I am in positions that I'm in because I belong here. I've worked for it. I think it's important that even though you have to believe in yourself, but you have to have a network and a community of people to steer you correct when you start to go astray. And whether it's professionals, professional therapists, your friends, your family, you have to have that network. It's important. And it's especially important. I think that's why I like to go to the bar associations, the Black bar associations. I find it more there, not just with peers my age, but with that community varying in age. I could go on and on about this, but I know we talk about mental health. I'm not a professional, obviously, in mental health, but I just think it's important to have that community. And when we're being mentors, I'm also learning how to be a mentor to the attorneys coming up behind me. I'm noticing that I'm not going to just talk to them about what they can do to advance their career, what path they can take. I'm also offering them advice that I'm being given as far as, having a family. Some women come to me, they talk about their infertility issues. And so me sharing my stories with them also helps them with their situation. So it's a give and take, and I think that's important in our community.
Terrance, may
Thank you
I?
so, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think for younger lawyers, people who are now entering the profession, flexibility is important for them. And so I think we may have to reimagine what the work week looks like for us as lawyers. And even before the pandemic, I had instituted a telework day, 1 day a week for each one of my law clerks. And they could have their doctor's appointments, travel, do whatever they needed to do without having to be in the office. And it's been a real morale booster for the law clerks. And I think we have to be a little more flexible in terms of them being able to meet their personal life goals, as well as functioning with us as a team to get our work done. So I think that's important too for well-being and for wellness, for us to consider flexibility in terms of how we all work together.
Thank you so much. I know that we're approaching our last 10 minutes here, and I want to make sure that we're able to get words of wisdom in from folks. But I see Judge Roland, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the fact that we know that the legal profession is a very stressful profession. We know that, and we hear comments made, especially by folks within my generation, baby boomers, about the fact that the profession has become less and less civil. The lack of civility is wearing on folks. And I certainly agree that we have to think of ways to try to and to encourage attorneys, especially in our community, to take advantage of some of the mindfulness and wellness opportunities that are available, to encourage folks to engage in self-care techniques, to go to your well, wherever you go to reinvigorate your spirit, whether that's family, friends, whether it's church, whether it's prayer, whatever, know your source of your energy and go there frequently. Because it's very important to take care of yourself. I also encourage folks to check, regardless of which jurisdiction you're in, almost every jurisdiction has a lawyer's assistance program. And I know in California, and I'm sure in most other jurisdictions, if an attorney does contact the lawyer's assistance program, the Bar Association agency that regulates attorneys in that jurisdiction is not apprised of the fact the attorney has contacted the lawyer's assistance program, and that that can be done regardless of what type of issue the lawyer may face, or may the lawyer just want someone to talk to without having that information that's shared disclosed to anyone else. So I would encourage anyone who might think that at some point there might be a need to contact the lawyer's assistance program for confidential and anonymous assistance.
Thank you, Judge Roland. So now we're going to get our final words of wisdom from the panel, and we're going to begin with John, and then we'll go to Judge Shelton. Your words of wisdom for folks there's so many young people who are part of this, who want to be like you, who want to have a career like you've had, and they just want to know what do they need to do so that they can follow in your footsteps and hopefully have a positive impact on the world like you've had.
The building block of any trial lawyer is experience, is learning how to try a case. My advice is to, if you want to be a trial lawyer, to go to one of the public agencies where you can be in trial from day one, like the Public Defender's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office, United States Attorney's Office, Federal Public Defender's Office. Get comfortable in court, because if you're not a threat to anyone, you're not going to be able to win a case. You won't be able to get clients. You become a threat to someone when you learn how to try a case. And learning how to try a case, you can't do it in seminars. You can't learn it from a book. You have to do it from experience. And the way you get that experience is at an agency, the aforementioned agencies. They'll have you in trial within the first month. You learn how to try a case and you get comfortable. That's the cornerstone of being a trial lawyer, civil rights lawyer, torts lawyer, any type of lawyer, a trial lawyer, is learning how to try a case.
Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it. Judge Shelton, your words of wisdom for folks who want to follow in your footsteps.
Well, I'd say just do it. Let's go for it. To quote Judge Arnett Hubbard, and something she told me once, and Judge Arnett Hubbard is the first woman president of the National Bar Association. She said, "Modesty gets you nothing but unnoticed." So just get out there and get it done. And I want to circle back and thank you and the members of Region 9 for putting together this program with the intent of celebrating our Black history and celebrating the Black Bar Association and its impact on society. And I hope that we have achieved that in such a short period of time. There's so much we can talk about, but I want to applaud everyone for participating today and to not hesitate to celebrate and promote the Black Bar Association. For I, for one, am steadfast in support of the National Bar Association and its affiliates. So thank you for allowing us to celebrate our history in this way tonight.
Thank you, Judge Shelton. President Sookdeo, if you could share your thoughts, and as you share your thoughts, there was a question of how you can be successful hanging out your own shingle, which I know you've done, as you give your words of wisdom.
Well, I'll address that question first. You just have to, like Judge Shelton said, you just have to do it. And you'll notice that opportunities and help will come your way. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to accept help and learn from everything. And with my words of wisdom, I would say, just do your best, embrace opportunities, but know when to say no so as to avoid spreading yourself too thin.
Thank you so
for
much.
having me, Terrance.
Of course, thank you. Judge Rawlinson, your words of wisdom.
Yes, thank you so much for including me on this esteemed panel. I've learned so much. And the one thing I would like to leave with the young lawyers is that you can do this. You can do it. Just know that within yourself that you can do this. The other thing I want to say is there are very few mistakes that cannot be corrected. So if you make a mistake, acknowledge it, and then find a way to correct it. The worst thing you can do is ignore a mistake that you've made, because the sooner you confront it and the sooner you correct it, the sooner you can go ahead to something else. I shudder at some of the mistakes I made as a young lawyer, but you have to acknowledge them, deal with them, learn from them, and move on. Don't let a mistake stop you in your tracks.
Thank you, Judge Rawlinson. President Jones, your words of wisdom for our audience.
Yes, I want to join the chorus. Thank you for having me on the panel tonight. It's been very, very interesting and very informative. But just to follow up on what Judge Rawlinson said, I have a little saying, a motto of mine, and it's not original, but it's don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. And the way my grandfather, who would say it, he says, if you can wake up and clothe yourself in your right mind, then everything else is gravy. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like my philosophy. It's my philosophy on life. It's my philosophy on work. I would just say, get to know you. The pandemic put a number on all of us. And for me, it really made me slow down. It didn't even slow down, it stopped. I just stopped. Because you couldn't go anywhere, right? Once I got over the shock of going to the grocery store and couldn't find toilet paper, I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. The world is coming to an end. I don't know what's happening. But once I got over that fear in the 6 months, I really spent time with myself. And so my motto now, life motto, in addition to what I just said, is that I'm going to write my own narrative. I'm not going to let someone tell me my story, and I'm going to build my story as I see fit. So when you're out there making mistakes, you're going to make mistakes. I mean, trial lawyers, I mean, you just make them. I mean, it's just the thing. Any sort of thing you do, you're going to make mistakes. But those are opportunities to build and to learn. And if you don't make mistakes, I submit you're not learning a damn thing. So you
Amen.
got to make mistakes and do that, and just keep moving in the positive. Just keep moving in the positive, and your destination is a brighter star.
Well said. And Judge Roland, we're going to give you the final word here.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to just take privilege to go back for just a minute to your slide where you identified some of the African-American lawyers who have changed the American landscape. And I just want to add 2 to that list. There are many, many others I want to acknowledge who could be added to the list, including the people who are panelists, my co-panelists here. But I would add Fred Gray Jr., who was legal counsel to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and who, based on whose advice we saw the major change in the American landscape with regard to what happened involving the civil rights movement. He also was the counsel for Rosa Parks. And so we know how important and that work was. I would also add Leo Branton Jr., who was the legal counsel to Angela Davis, and another person who played a major role in helping to shape the American landscape. As far as words of wisdom, I wish I had heard this many moons ago when I was starting out as a young attorney and didn't know where in the world I was going or what I was doing. Just knew that I needed to show up by 9:00 a.m. every Monday through Sunday, almost definitely Monday through Saturday. When we were in a position, this is how long ago this was, women could not even wear dresses at the firm. You couldn't wear pants or dresses. You had to wear a suit. That was it. But I go back to the advice that everyone should strive to be a stellar practitioner. That is what is going to get you pretty far in and of itself. Believe in yourself, work hard, and always produce your best work product. Don't ever release anything other than what is your best work product. Make sure that you have at least one mentor in your workplace and many mentors outside of your workplace. And when I say mentors, I'm talking about folks who you can really tell how you feel, and folks who will give you candid feedback about what you tell them. Make sure you give back, get involved, and participate. Don't just join, but participate. And always remember who you are, where you come from. Remember that, I remember when my daughter was growing up, she came home and said, "Oh, Mom, we talked about slavery today." She said it was just terrible. And I said, "What do you mean? We are the survivors." You think back on the pictures that, for example, Terrance showed us of the folks who were lined up, shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, head to foot on during the Middle Passage on those slave ships. We are the survivors. We come from special stock. So there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Remember who you are. Go into every setting, every situation, and you'll be in many where you are the only one. Know who you are and never forget it. And last thing, make sure you go to your well of strength, your well of truth, whether it's, like I said, church, prayer, family, friends, and luxuriate in it. Let it reinvigorate your spirit.
Thank you so much, Judge Roland. Thank you so much, panel. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Please join the National Bar Association, Cable, and all of our beautiful affiliates, and also California Lawyers Association. Also, for those who can join me tomorrow, I'm hosting another Black History Month program from 12 p.m. to 1:15 p.m. with the Honorable Judge Smiley and the Honorable Judge Susan Bolanos. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. If you need MCLE credit, please contact Carla Ramos or myself, and we're also going to provide the written materials I prepared to everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of your Black History Month. Thanks so much, everybody. Take it easy.
Thank you.